This week's Parsha is Mishpatim and also Parsha Shekalim. It's the first of the four of the, what we're known as the Arba Parshios. So it's always the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Adar. Right? It's going to be Purim soon. And it's going to be Pesach. Oh my goodness. So everyone's blood pressure just went up about 10 degrees. Okay. One of the things that we read in Parshas Mishpatim, this is really the first place where Hashem, in any sense of detail, presents us with laws that will govern our society. And as part of that, the Torah makes a point of saying that there are certain laws having to do with damages, that if you injure someone or cause injury to someone else, Hashem says you have to feel a sense of liability. And that's where we get all the laws of damages that are in place in Western society, or in almost every society in the world today, are based upon the laws of the Torah. The very opening Mishnah of Maseches Bava Kama, it says, Arba'a Avos Nezikin. There are four categories of damage that are described by the Torah. And they are Hashor, V'Habor, V'Hamaveh, V'Hahever. And the Talmud goes through describing how these different categories of damage are different in their conceptually, logically, how they're different from each other. If you have any son who's in 6th grade or 7th grade, I can guarantee you, 6th, 7th, or 8th grade, they have learned this Mishnah at some point. Arba Avos Nezikin, the four categories of damage. It's one of the first Mishnayos that our sons study. And shor means when an ox gores, so there's a certain violent act that the animal is doing. Bor is if a human being digs a pit and an animal falls into that pit and is damaged or dies, so then the digger of the pit, because he dug it in a public thoroughfare, is responsible for the damages. Mav'eh, it's a discussion in the Gemara whether it refers to a human being causing damage through rubbing up against something, or whether it refers to an animal because it's hungry, or because it's got an itch, rubs up against someone or someone's wall and damages it. And finally, heve'er, which is burning, starting a fire, and irresponsibly starting a fire in your property, knowing that in all likelihood it'll travel to someone else's property and cause damage or injury. So in all of those cases, these are all discussed in the Torah. And we also know that our sages traditionally have found great metaphorical meaning, even though these are very technical laws that are discussed extensively by the Gemara and are codified in Shulchan Aruch, but there's also great metaphorical value to these different ideas. For example, one of the slichos that we say during Aseres Yemei Tshuva starts off with the words Arba'a Avos Nezikin Hein. There are four types of damagers, and these four damagers are an allusion, according to this liturgical hymn in Slichos, is a reference to the four exiles that the Jewish people have gone through over the course of our very tragic history in the diaspora. So, using that line of reasoning, the Al-Shech HaKadosh finds great metaphorical meaning in one of those four categories known as the damage of bore, of digging a pit. And here's the text before you. It's in Shemot Perek Chaf Aleph, Pasuk Lamed Gimel and Lamed Dalet. The Torah says, V'chi yiftach ish bor, that if a person opens up a pit. Now, opening a pit means that there was a board or a plank over a pit, like a manhole cover, and you go over and you lift up the cover. O ki yichre ish bor v'lo yichasen. Or if a person actually digs a brand new pit and doesn't cover it up, v'nafal shama shor o chamor. And as a result, an ox or a donkey of someone else walks right into it and falls in, and the animal dies. So Baal Habor Yishalem. So the owner of the pit, the person who dug the pit or uncovered the pit, has to pay Kesef Yashiv Liva Alav, he has to pay money to the owner of the animal. V'hamei sihielo, and the carcass shall belong to him. Who him is a discussion in the Gemara. We won't get into that now, who is entitled to the carcass. But it belongs to him. And that's an ambiguous phrase. It's a technical law. But we're going to find tremendous significance in our discussion when we look at the Al-Shech HaKadosh. Al-Shech HaKadosh is living in the 17th century in the magical, mysterious city of Tzfas at the same time as Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Beit Yosef. And this is a time of tremendous, tremendous spiritual growth and study of Kabbalah. And according to our tradition, the Al-Shech actually studied Torah with a Malach, with an angel. And he also studied with Eliyahu Hanavi. And he was able to write his Torah commentary because of the mystical access that he had. So I want us to start with the second paragraph of the Al-Shech HaKadosh. Let's take a look where that Lamed Gimel is in parentheses, in source number 3. He says, Ata ba v'yedaber al hatzara haba'a al nefesh adam me'asher yir'eh v'yilmad mima'aseh chavero. He says, up until now, the Torah was talking about the damage of fire. And leading up to this pasuk talking about the damage of the pit, the Torah was talking about the damage of fire. And the damage of fire is a metaphorical allusion to the damage that can come to people who do wicked things. And basically Hashem says that if you act wickedly, eventually the fire will catch up to you. That's the allusion of the discussion of fire in the pasuk. But now he says, the damage of the pit is an allusion to the damage that can be caused to someone when he learns from the behavior of other people. Ki ya'aser Reuven es hara shogegu mezid. He says, because sometimes it'll happen that Reuven, just as an example, the name of one person, may do something evil, may do something improper, whether purposely or unintentionally. V'yir'ehu Shimon. Shimon will witness that. V'yaseh kein gamhu. Monkey see, monkey do. He'll imitate him and do the same thing. V'nafal gamhu babor kara v'yachperehu Reuven. He will therefore fall into the same pit that Reuven had dug. In other words, when a person decides to do something inappropriate, he digs a pit for himself. But sometimes you're not just digging a pit for yourself, because if others learn from your example, they'll fall into the same pit. V'zehu omro ki yiftach ish bor. And that's why the pasuk says that if a person uncovers a pit, he says, V'hu ki derech hachotei levilti hatchil b'mezid ki im b'shogeg. He says, because the idea of just uncovering a pit, represents a person who acts without malice, malicious intent. V'hu patach lahamit hashchit kav lekav b'mezid. But that eventually leads to more destructive behavior, that even though you do things unintentionally without malice, you eventually get into the habit of doing negative and addictive things, and eventually you turn into someone even worse. V'zehu omro ki yiftach ish. And therefore, even though it first off starts off by saying you uncover a pit, which is less harmful, then you end up digging a pit, and you end up actually doing the act knowingly and intentionally. And the Gehenna bor lipolbo, and this pit represents the pit of Gehenna that you dig for yourself. V'tihiyeh peticha bilvad shehi avera b'shogeg shetigor lo od avera zulata ba'ofen ya'amik boro. And therefore, you just uncover the pit, which means an unintentional act. However, that's going to cause you to continue sinning. You'll deepen the pit. Oki yichre bizadon bor v'shichet lipolbo she'ena peticha bilvad ki im kriya atzmit shalcha amuka. So therefore, the next destructive act that leads to the next destructive act of not just uncovering the sin, but actually taking a tremendous amount of enthusiasm to actually dig a new pit for yourself. So you discover something, you bump into something accidentally, you bump into something on the internet, let's say, just as an example, oh, I didn't mean to open up that website. Oh, interesting. I happened to just open up the pit. But then the next day, you type in the URL yourself, and you dig the pit on your own. You see? V'lo yechasenu. And then the Torah says, and you neglect to cover up the pit. Shelo yechta b'seiter rak bigalui. That you compound the grievance because instead of sinning privately, other people are aware of what you're doing, and you expose the pit to others. Va'ofen yilmedu mimenu v'yiflu b'shachat rishto. So that people will learn from you and they'll fall into the same destructive pattern. Shor uboro shor o chamor shehu mezid kishor haminageach mezido shegei kachamor b'chisaron da'as. And therefore the Torah says shor o chamor, because an ox or a donkey can fall into the pit. An ox represents a goring animal which acts with malice. That represents another person will learn from you and do the intentional sin. Or a chamor, sometimes people are as dumb as a donkey, and they do it out of their innocence, but they fall into the pit nonetheless. But ultimately, by digging the pit and exposing what you've done, you're going to cause other people to learn from you. And this is where the Alshich then finishes in his commentary to Pasuk Lamed Daled. He says, "Az then Baal Habor Shahaya Siba Yachatio Kemohu Yishalem." The owner, the digger of the pit, who was the cause of this person's sin, has to pay. What does it mean he has to pay? Umata kanato leval yishalem begehinam, hu kesef yashiv leva'alav. So first of all, he's responsible. So if I do something publicly that causes other people to sin, I'm responsible for their sin. I have to pay. But what do I have to pay? Either I have to go into Gehenna, that's one way to pay, or the other way to pay is kesef yashiv livalav. The Torah says you pay money to the person. Shahacheshek v'hakosef ad Hashem asher hifsid asher lamad mimenu yashiv livalav ki yachzirenu b'teshuvah. The word kesef is a reference to the person who was that innocent guy who learned from me. He was a kosef. The word kosef from the word kesef. What does it mean to be kosef? It means to really desire to serve Hashem. He's an innocent guy. He wants to serve Hashem. But you know what? I misled him. I did something I set an example for him, and therefore Yashiv Livalav, I have to return him to his owner. You know who his owner is? Hashem. I have to return him. I have to make him into a Baal Tshuva. I'm responsible. If I caused him to sin, I have to bring him back also. I have to make sure that I rehabilitate him. O karakesef el hanefesh, okay? We skip that line. Va'az al yedei kain, lo bilvad yitakein ivuto, ki imgam v'hameti hielo. If I do that, then not only will I have corrected my corruptive act, but also, the Torah says, the carcass will belong to him. Ki asher lamad mimenu v'chata u'v'chayav nikramet, atach sheyachzerenu b'tshuva hielo ki ilu bira'o. And Hashem will give me credit as if I resurrected this person. When he sinned, he was like a dead person because he destroyed his neshama by imitating me. By my bringing him back and rehabilitating him and making sure that I correct the mistake and showing him that I was wrong, so then the dead, meaning that person who was a sinner, who I've resurrected, I've brought back to life, will now be attributed to me as well. And it'll be considered as if I created him, I gave him life. So what the Alshich says that the Torah is trying to depict over here is really a beautiful process. Is that a lot of times we have to be careful that not only do we dig pits for ourselves, but when we dig pits in a public thoroughfare, when we demonstrate and model for other people bad behavior, so then we're also causing other people to sin, and they fall. And the only way that we can correct that is if we learn to pattern proper behavior, and we teach people to say, you know what, I was wrong, and I don't want you to learn to become the way I used to be. I'd rather you learn from the way that I am now, and let's work on becoming better people together. Whenever I think of this beautiful, beautiful Alshich, I think about, and you'll forgive me because some of you may be annoyed for me bringing this up, but I think about talking in shul. Because this is a perfect example of how people pattern negative behavior, and they're not only doing it for themselves, but they're setting an example. Because whether you're aware of it or not, people are looking up to you. People are looking up to each and every one of you, whether it's your daughters, whether it's the lady sitting next to you who's never come to shul before, or doesn't view herself as experienced as you in the synagogue experience. But people are learning from you. People are looking at you, and you're setting an example. And if you dig that pit and you say, well, I need to talk to my friend, but it's got nothing to do with anybody else, but the reality is that it does. Because by you modeling that behavior, it's not just for you, it's for other people as well. And the only way that you're going to correct it is by rectifying the behavior in the presence of that very same person. The same thing could apply to a number of other things. I can't tell you how aptly this applies to Lashon Hara as well. Because, many people will go to a shir and they'll hear about the evils of Lashon Hara and about how it's prohibited by the Torah to gossip about somebody else. But then they'll go to their favorite coffee clutch, and all of a sudden a woman who's very frum, how they've always admired and always have looked up to, all of a sudden starts gossiping. And then the whole structure, the whole education that they received about the evils of Lashon Hara is destroyed because the pit has been dug and now they've fallen into the same pit that you just dug. And you know that famous story about the man who goes to the Rebbe and says, how do I correct the Lashon Hara? So he says, take a bag of feathers or a pillow of feathers and shake it out into the street, and now go back and pick up all the feathers, right? So, but here specifically, when you set an example for other people, when you model behavior for other people, realize that it's not just you who are affected. It's all the people that admire you and respect you and look up to you. And I guarantee it. I guarantee that as small as you think you may be, there are people in this world who look up to you. And as such, you have to realize what a responsibility it is. If you're going to do something inappropriate, make sure you don't dig your pit in Rishus Harabim in a public thoroughfare where other people can learn from that. And if you do, rest assured, says the Alshech, that there's a way to make restitution. You've got to make sure that anyone who learns from you you have the opportunity to be an educator as well for positive things as well as for negative things. Okay, so you make the application where you feel it's appropriate, and have a wonderful day.